What's going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres, publisher and lead editor of Ducks Digest, covering the Oregon Ducks for Sports Illustrated on Fan Nation. We have a very special edition of the podcast today, signing day special, day one of the early signing period for the 2022 class. And I'm joined by Ducks Digest reporter Dylan Rubenking. I like to call him Rube sometimes. How we doing, Rube?
It's been a minute since I've been asked that question on a stream. I've been doing good. It's super exciting to see some of these guys finally sign on, to see that there is kind of some substance still to this class after so many guys decommitted. So it's pretty cool to see that these guys are making their dream a reality.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that was one of my, I can't remember, it was Texags that you got called Rube, right?
Yeah.
God, yeah. No, I just took that and ran with it. And then for you guys that are new to the Ducks Dish podcast or our work over at Ducks Digest, we have a killer duo of Dylans, Dylan Mickinen and Dylan Rubenking. So that's kind of how we differentiate. I'm rocking some specs today for those of you guys that can see on the stream, because that's what you need to do when you stare at a screen for 12 hours a day when you're working. But just wanted to get that out of the way. And then if you guys are tuned in to the live stream on YouTube, on my YouTube channel at Oregon Football Max Torres, thanks so much for tuning in today. Excited to get into today's episode of the pod. Go ahead and drop a comment on how you're feeling about day one of the early signing period and how you're feeling about this class. And then if you guys are watching on the replay, go ahead and do the same. Let me know who you're most excited about in this 2022 class. Ducks signing, I believe it was 7 commits here on Wednesday, December 15th to get things going. But yeah, so that's now that that's all out of the way, welcome to the show. Day one, I think it went honestly pretty well for all things considered. If you think about Cristobal leaving to Miami, all the crazy fallout that we saw from that followed that, and then obviously with Lanning coaching the Bulldogs. I don't know exactly where he is. I haven't been doing the plane tracking lately, but I feel like it'd probably be safe to consider to assume that he's back in Georgia getting the Bulldogs ready for their matchup against Michigan. But considering that and how the staff's still kind of being built, that was another piece of big news today. Is looks like Kenny Dillingham, the Florida State offensive coordinator, is going to be coming out to take the job at Oregon and be the next OC. First really, really big hire as far as, coaches, X's and O's on the field for Lanning in the Oregon era. So I kind of went a lot of different directions there, Dylan. But maybe that was the question I wanted to ask you. Is how are you feeling, to start things off here at the early signing period?
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have a head coach for all these signees to kind of talk to, because I know there have been reports that Dan Lanning was communicating with a couple of the guys who signed today, especially Anthony Jones, the guy who flipped from Texas today, which we'll talk about, I'm sure. But it's nice that, there's a little bit of coaching staff to be spoken of. I mean, it wasn't completely wiped out. And of course, there are guys that are going to be coming back for the Alamo Bowl. But yeah, I think Dan Lanning's probably back to Athens. I think that game's 2 weeks from Saturday, I believe. So obviously have to prepare for that. But at the same time, yeah, it's nice to see that the offensive coordinator job has been filled. I do think a lot of people have been kind of talking about it as like they're not sure because Florida State, they weren't very good. And they had so many injuries, so many inconsistencies, such a young team. That it's kind of hard to judge, but I do think it's a solid hire. So I'm feeling pretty good about that so far.
Yeah, I think that was a good, item to check off for Dan Lanning. I think I agree with the points that you have as far as, people being maybe a little bit skeptical, especially with Dillingham being such a young guy. But he's garnered legitimate Power 5 interest, since rising through the coaching ranks. And I think that that's one of the advantages rather that I think come with being such a young coach is recruiting. I mean, you look at Mario Cristobal and how well the Ducks did when he was here. I think we really learned, if we didn't already know, recruiting is an effort thing. The people who do the best at recruiting just work their tails off. And I think that that's an advantage that we'll see for Oregon with such a young staff now, at least with Lanning and Dillingham to start out here. And then the reported extension of Don Johnson, director of player personnel. That was really big. You talk about getting some key pieces in place. Now you have some guys that can recruit for you or continue recruiting for you. And then I'm sure Lanny's just been on the phone 24/7 now since he got the job, trying to talk to some of these guys. But yeah, that was kind of some of the big news that broke today before all the signing stuff started. So I'm kind of thinking that we could go through some of these signees and kind of see what things are looking like. Give some of our thoughts on these guys and what we think they bring to the table. And then, field some questions and comments as they come up. How's that sound?
Let's do it.
All right. Well, how about we just go, I think we can try to go maybe chronologically here and, kind of track things for Oregon. Sir Mells was the first signee of the day. Really, really big defensive lineman out of Liberty High School in Henderson, Nevada, 6'5", 327 pounds, just an absolute monster in the trenches. And I think that what encourages me so much about him is that he's one of those body types that you don't find out west. I feel like we hear that a lot when we're talking about some of these big time defensive linemen rather, but he really is. And especially when you consider Jason Jones entering the transfer portal, a young offensive, I'm getting my sides of the ball mixed up. I got to slow down. Jason Jones, a young defensive lineman for Oregon, who I thought was really coming around, played in every game this season. He entered the transfer portal today. So you just look at trying to have someone to fill in for him. I think that Sir Mells could potentially be seeing some pretty significant reps here. And I think he's got some great athleticism for how big of a body he has, that huge frame that he has. And I think that you need more guys like him, especially on the defensive side of the ball, because we've seen those huge bodies coming on the offensive side of the ball for quite a while now. But I think that defensive line depth is still a little bit behind the offense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, especially with the news of Jason Jones transferring, I mean, he was such a big body too. So I definitely think signing 2 defensive tackles with Ben Roberts as well. I think that was huge given that news today. But yeah, Sir Mells, I mean, he reminds me of a taller Jordan Scott coming out of high school because you just don't see guys pushing that 330 mark. But like you said, like he's super athletic. He doesn't really move like he's 330 pounds. I mean, the dude is really athletic. And I think what my favorite thing about him is out of probably everybody that signed today, I think he's been the one that's been the most locked in with Oregon since he committed. Like, I don't remember ever seeing him take any other visits, any other in-house visits. Like, I don't remember him really even straying away from Oregon whatsoever. And he committed back in June. So I love that he's got this energy. He's been bringing, the energy toward all those other prospects and commits. And it's just been all about Oregon since day one. So I love the energy he brings, and I can't wait to see what he does. And hopefully, you're right. I hope he does get some playing time, given there's so much youth that's going to be on the defense, especially in the middle of that defensive line.
Yeah, I think he's one of those guys that has been super high energy all throughout the recruiting process. I talked to him a couple times, after he decommitted from Washington, and then he was looking like he was really liking Oregon, and he was someone that I feel like once he got on campus, that was all it was going to take. And then sure enough, he was the first guy to commit to Oregon once the recruiting dead period ended, and they were able to get guys back to Eugene, back in the HDC, back at Autzen Stadium. And that's really what I think, regardless of what staff you have in here, obviously you want a hardworking staff, but at a certain point, depending on what these guys' recruitments are looking like, Autzen kind of just does the work. The brand sells itself, I feel like. So obviously there's a tremendous amount of work that goes into building those relationships that can't be understated or undervalued. But I think that was huge for Mells. And then we already talked about how he, really fits the need and, some of the player styles that we've been seeing in recent years. And I think that kind of goes along with, Mario laid the blueprint for building an SEC type of team and, really building out the roster that way. And I think that Lanning's going to kind of pick up right where he left off. And And really at the end of the day, obviously you want to get really solid players, but another big part of it is filling the needs on your roster. And I think that's a good way to get started.
Yeah, you mentioned kind of an SEC style. I think Sir Mells is definitely a guy that, you probably see a lot of in the SEC, like especially going to teams like Georgia, Alabama, Auburn. Like they always have those just monstrous defensive linemen that end up there. Like you're talking about Jordan Davis, who's what 340 at Georgia. So I
It's
I do
huge.
think that yeah, and he looks every bit of it. But I think it's going to be super fun to kind of see the trend of just monstrous defensive linemen that can move and that offensive linemen have, no business trying to move whatsoever. And Sir Mells is definitely going to be one of those guys. So, yeah, I think, the trenches, the focus on the trenches was such a huge thing with Cristobal. And I think that's one thing that I was going to miss as soon as Cristobal left. I was like, I really hope that that's still an emphasis because, the offensive line has been such a strength the last couple of years for this Oregon team. The defensive line has so much promise. I just wanted to keep that, momentum going on both sides. And it looks like so far, the offensive line, there's only one so far that's signed. I hope they can get Dave Yulee in there signed soon as well. And then maybe some other guys like Josh Connerly, if he's, I don't remember seeing if he signed somewhere today. Did he?
No, I don't believe he did. He's the last I heard about him, I know someone was asking in the question, in the comment section about what's it looking like with him, and he's going to be signing in February, so he's definitely taking his time. And I think that he's someone that the Ducks are in a good spot with as far as having him on campus. He was here recently. I can't remember what game it was for, but he was here in Eugene recently, and I think that it's a little tough, at least where they're at now, seeing that they don't have an offensive line staff right now, and Cristobal and Mirabal are obviously moving on. Still waiting on confirmation for that Mirabal move, but I feel like it's pretty obvious at this point. So I think Connerly's pretty much the top offensive lineman out west, and especially with him being a Pacific Northwest guy, if I'm landing, I think that that's someone I really want to try to prioritize as things get going here, but. At the same time, lucky for him, it looks like he has a little bit more time to work with as far as getting all that going and starting that relationship once he actually gets to Eugene full time.
Yeah.
And then, oh my bad, I didn't want to cut you off.
Yeah, I definitely just think I was just going to say, I think it's really important right now to try to keep those Pacific Northwest guys home, whether it be Washington or Oregon. Definitely after they didn't get Darius Clemens, they were a lock for him for so long, and he ended up going to Michigan. So I think Connerly is definitely the next big guy to come out of the Northwest that they need to take care of.
Yeah. We can, before we move on to our next guy, we can talk about Clemens real quick because he's a guy that's a recruitment that I covered for a really long time. And I feel like, especially with him being an in-state guy, you want to be prioritizing those guys and keeping the best players within the state's borders. I think the good thing for Oregon is that he's not going to a Pac-12 school. I mean, that'd be kind of a worst case scenario, but I'm right there with you. And from what I gathered from covering him extensively, he was pretty much in the bag for Oregon. But things change obviously when Cristobal went to Miami. And he offered Clemens as well, so he tried to make a push to get in the picture with the Hurricanes. And then let's see what else. And then I think another part of this too that is honestly playing a really big factor is we don't know about Brian McClendon's coaching future at Oregon. He's the interim head coach right now, but I feel like at this rate, I don't know if we should expect to hear something until after the Alamo Bowl. It's just really weird because it's just another element, piece of the puzzle for a lot of these recruits that are considering Oregon, or even committed to Oregon that they don't know what's going on because they don't know. They know who their head coach is going to be now, but they don't know who their positional coach is going to be, which for Oregon now with a lot of these guys since Mario is gone, those are the people that have really put in a lot of effort building that relationship and getting Oregon towards the top of their list or sealing the deal and getting the commitment. So I think that's something that really can't be understated right now, as far as just another piece of Oregon recruiting kind of being in limbo since we don't know McClendon's future just yet.
Yeah, you were talking about it earlier. Like if Cristobal would have stayed, how many of these, decommitments, how many of these guys that are going elsewhere, how many would have probably gone to Oregon? Like the class would have been definitely full. But yeah, I think Brian McClendon's future is huge. Mirabal, I think it's safe to say he's going to Miami. I know I've seen a couple guys who have gone to visits to Miami and they've tagged Mirabal, so that's kind of as official as it gets. But we've talked to recruits for a while. My work with recruits was much more in the summer, but you heard so many times where it's like, yeah, I committed here to Eugene because of Alex Mirabal, because of Brian McClendon, because of Rod Chance. Like they do the majority of the one-on-one recruiting stuff with the phone calls and the tour on campus. So that's definitely huge to try to get those spots shored up.
So we'll have to wait to see what happens with McClendon. That's next question that we kind of have on the screen here. He's asking, Max, do you guys think that Oregon will somehow hold on to Brian McClendon? He's definitely. I said this in one of our previous episodes that I feel like he's got to be the priority from the last staff, and then you're also looking at Joe Salavea and Rod Chance as some of the big names that were kind of up in the air right now as far as what's going on with them and if they're going to be staying in Eugene or if they're going to be moving on to other jobs now. And then Jim Mastro as well. He's another guy you can't forget. Bobby Williams. So really, again, just kind of a weird time for Oregon football because you have the Alamo Bowl, you have the 2022 class to figure out. But at the same time, since you have a new coach, it's kind of like part of me is like, okay, I just want to get to 2022 and see what the roster is going to look like, see what the team's going to be looking like, how the rest of the staff fills out. But a lot of things that we still need to answer here. How about we talk about Harrison Taggart? What do you think?
Yeah, I'm all for it.
All right, I'll get his highlights up. I know you said you were watching some film, so we'll throw on some film. But the biggest thing is for me, I feel like, he is a guy who hasn't been committed super long. And I think that it's great to see him stay in the fold, especially with Ken Wilson heading to take over the program at Nevada. But Corner Canyon, let's talk about that school and in Utah. That's, one of the best, if not the best program. I know Orem's a great program in Utah as well. Jackson Powers Johnson also went to Corner Canyon. So, you just look at the quickness that you see from Taggart and how instinctual he is. And, man, this is looking like another big-time get for Oregon.
Yeah, he's got a nose for the football. I mean, he's just as pure a linebacker as it gets. I could see him down the line being a 100 tackle kind of guy once he gets that spot. I think he's going to be a phenomenal fit for Oregon. The thing is, though, and obviously we saw it this year with how much of a hit their depth took at linebacker was just the youth that they had this year. And guys like Jeffrey Bossa, who was not a linebacker coming in, he stepped in. Keith Brown stepped in. Jackson LeDuc at the end of the year. So I do think that Harrison Taggart could carve out a role for himself. It might be a little bit, given how much talent they have. But I think it's exciting that they have someone who, is the all-time leading tackler at Corner Canyon, has had so much success there. They won 3 straight state titles, and I think we're 1 win away from a 4th in his senior year, but they fell short. They lost very, very few games in his career there. So he knows how to win. He knows what it takes to win, at least at the high school level. College is a different animal, but he's had Jackson Powers Johnson in his ear, I'm sure, for a long time. They've been pals since elementary school. I think he told me. I talked to Harrison Taggart. I think that was end of July about his visit. So they've been pals for a while. He's been hounding him to come to Oregon, and he finally did. And the fact that he got locked up today was huge. But yeah, super talented. Like you said, the word you said, instinctual. I think that's the best way to describe him. He's just got a nose for the ball, really good eyes, but he doesn't linger too long. And he's just very, very physical. He's not huge. Like he's not Noah Sewell, 260 Justin Flo kind of thing, but he's definitely very physical and can really carve himself a role.
Absolutely. And you talk about that Corner Canyon connection. It's hard to think of a better recruiter on this Oregon team than Jackson Powers Johnson, getting that alumni connection. And then even when you think about back to when Jackson Powers Johnson was committed to Oregon before he got here, he was still one of the vocal recruiters for Oregon and definitely helped get some big time prospects in the fold for Oregon. So there's a couple guys we wanted to hit off of, but we also are getting some questions here. So I want to get to some of these about kind of what's going on here. and see what's on your guys' mind. So let's see here. All right. Andrew says, I'm so happy Jalil Tucker signed. Hopefully Florence follows. This is definitely one of the biggest storylines for Oregon coming out of early signing day. Because I didn't really expect it. Jalil Tucker, he stayed committed to Oregon after Jalil Florence decommitted, and he was saying, I think he actually said that he wasn't signing on the 15th. I'm trying to look on Twitter right now, but I believe that's what he initially said. So when I saw that tweet from Oregon football announcing that he had actually signed, I thought that was pretty surprising. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, December 9th, he tweeted, I will not be signing December 15th. Here we are on December 15th, and what do you know? He signs. You think about why this is important for a variety of reasons, right? You're looking at the San Diego pipeline, which has been incredibly fruitful for Oregon and very important in those California recruiting efforts, the Cali Flock, as they like to call it. Lincoln is one of the best schools in San Diego, and there's a bunch of other talented guys there. Tucker is one of the most electric playmakers in the country or in California. And I know that Florida State was going after him and he wanted to play some wide receiver as well. That's kind of why Florida State was appealing to him in the recruiting process. And maybe with the hits that Oregon's wide receiver depth has taken both on the team and on the recruiting trail, maybe he has a chance to do that now at Oregon. But super, super fast guy. You can never overstate the value of having speed, I think. And, he's going against a lot of really talented guys in San Diego. So I think this is super valuable. And then obviously, hopefully this helps seeing him on board, hopefully helps get Jalil Florence back in the fold for Oregon since he decommitted following Cristobal's departure and took a visit to USC after getting offered.
Yeah, because Jalil Tucker hasn't been committed for super long either. I think it was at the tail end of the summer where he committed, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I was super surprised. I think it was like late August, but I was very, very surprised when he signed as well, because I remember seeing that tweet that he wasn't signing, and Florence had already decommitted. So my hopes honestly were not that high that Jalil Tucker at least wouldn't sign today, but I thought maybe a decommitment was coming because there's just been so much movement that kind of involves him. Obviously, Cristobal going to Miami. You talked about California and Stanford's been on the rise. I don't remember if they offered him, but Stanford probably has the top class in the Pac-12 right now. USC is probably going to be the number one before it's all said and done. So I was really surprised that he stayed true, and I'm glad he did because, watching his film, he is absolutely electric. I mean, when I was watching him, I was not sure why he only wanted to be corner. Like, why wouldn't you want to be wide receiver and corner? Like, I think he's very, very polished at doing both. He's super fast. He doesn't really look 6 feet, and he's only 6 feet. And he looks bigger out there as a receiver specifically, but really good hands, super fast, very, very smooth on both sides of the ball. And on defense particularly, I really like his breaking speed, how he can kind of, get into one route and just read the throw, read the pass, and just hunt it down and hunt the ball carriers down. So I think he's super solid. I really want to see him kind of get his chance on both sides, or maybe as a returner for Oregon, especially if Mikael Wright, goes to the NFL. I think he would get a great shot there. But as a corner, I mean, that's a huge area of need. I think he'll be in the running potentially to be probably a corner 2 to start the year next year. But even if they wanted to explore and put him at a receiver, I think he could make a spot for himself there too, because he's as talented and as explosive as anybody that is in this recruiting class right now.
Corner, definitely a position in need, like you mentioned, Dylan, especially with the transfer of DJ James, or he entered the transfer portal, so we don't know if he's actually going to be on the move for a fact yet. We saw just a couple nights ago, Seven McGee said that he was going to enter the portal, and then Lanning talked to him, and then he took his name. He said he wasn't going to be entering the transfer portal, so maybe the window of opportunity is still open there for Lanning to get DJ James back in the fold, but obviously we're seeing some movement there, as you would expect with a program in transition. But now they got a new guy heading the ship, so I think that that'll probably help them if they can get some conversations going there. And Exploring with Ben says there's still the transfer portal also just to fill in some depth issues. Yeah, which I think is definitely important to keep in mind here. You threw out some numbers, I think, in your answer to the last question, Dylan. But just to kind of debrief where Oregon stands right now as far as the class rankings go, in the 247 composite, they have the number 31 class in the country and the number 2 class in the Pac-12 behind Stanford, which is super bizarre. I don't think those words have ever come out of my mouth or that kind of a sentence just because Stanford's not really known as a recruiting power. But David Shaw looks like he's turning around a little bit. I know that USC got some pretty big commitments today. You look at Zion Branch out of Bishop Gorman. Fabian Ross was another guy that signed. So 2 defensive backs coming out of the Las Vegas area, heading to Los Angeles to play for Lincoln Riley, which I believe has the worst class in the Pac-12 right now, but obviously we know that's going to change. So transfer portal obviously going to be an option for Oregon to turn to, depending on how the rest of the class, kind of shakes out. Question I want to address here, is Cyrus Moss still unsigned? He is. I talked to Moss last night. He was fresh off his trips to USC and Miami. You talk about a crazy weekend, starting the weekend at USC and Los Angeles, then flying all the way across the country to see Mario Cristobal and his new digs in Coral Gables. And I was asking him, is it kind of weird? You were literally getting recruited by him like about a week or so ago to go to Oregon. And then you get to Miami and he's wearing new colors. And he was telling me, yeah, it's weird to see him wearing new colors. And now he was saying that the pitch is kind of going from being the next Kayvon Thibodeau to being the next Greg Rousseau, who went to Miami, or the next Jalen Phillips, who's having a really good fresh rookie year rather with the Dolphins. So he's still unsigned, but he's going to be working from a top 5 of Alabama, Arizona State, Oregon, Miami, and USC. And he's going to be signing on Friday, December 17th, before going public with his announcement at the Adidas All-American Bowl in San Antonio early next year. So I feel like this is a guy that the Ducks really want to try to turn up the heat on, Dylan, especially with Kayvon Thibodeau leaving and needing a pass rusher.
Yeah, they absolutely need a pass rusher. He's as talented as any that is in the country, honestly, in 2022. He's a big body, and I think that especially with USC on the rise and with Miami and the whole thing with Cristobal, I think you got to lock him up. I mean, he is I think he's probably priority number 1. I think I've said that a couple shows now. And I feel like he's been priority number 1 for Oregon even before the whole coaching change, just because, it was assumed that Kayvon was going to be moving on and there wasn't a whole lot of consistent production behind Kayvon off the edge. I do like that they picked up Anthony Jones today because I do think he could fill in at that spot. Braden Swinson's another guy I'm super excited about coming back, but I think with his size and versatility and athleticism, you have to lock down Cyrus Moss. You can't let him go to the Pac-12 with USC or Arizona State, and you can't let him go to Mario Cristobal in Miami. That's definitely a guy that should be target number 1.
Yeah, exactly. All that's right on. And then to kind of wrap up, my little some nuggets of information here from my talk with Moss. He made those trips to USC and Miami hoping to get some clarity, but he told me that I just complicated things for him because he was originally going to sign today, I believe, on Wednesday, and then now he pushed it back to Friday. So he has a ton to think about. I know that he really likes the culture that that Lincoln Riley's instilling at USC. And then it's really kind of crazy how it's a similar situation with Mario in Miami, how it's 2 storied programs that have just they haven't been what they're used to being. And now they're kind of both their new head coaches are trying to battle back. So he had told me that he hadn't heard from Dan Lanning yet when I talked to him on Tuesday night. So, hopefully that changes for the Ducks because he's got to be a priority and you can never have too many edge rushers. And he's just a can't miss guy that they definitely would like to add. But if I had to make my guess right now, I'd probably say USC leads. But, like I said, he has a lot to think about and, things are getting pretty tough for him as far as the decision goes. But that's what I have to say about Cyrus Moss. Question from Gary. Thanks for the question, Gary. Max, can you confirm reports out of Baylor of the Ducks poaching one of their coaches as a co-defensive coordinator? I can't confirm that right now, but just to get people up to speed, it's looking like Oregon is closing in on hiring Baylor safeties coach and special teams coordinator, Matt Polage. That's according to a report on Wednesday from Yahoo Sports' Pete Thamel. And it looks like he would be, if he does end up coming to Oregon, he would be a co-defensive coordinator. Was able to do a little bit of research on him. I know that there were some questions in the live stream here about kind of what we know about him. He's been coaching a lot longer than, or maybe not a lot longer, but he's been coaching longer than Dillingham has. I think it was 11 total years is what the number that it came out to. And you look at Baylor, Big 12 champions, and Dave Aranda really, I feel like he's built that identity in Waco around the defense. So I think that he's obviously done a pretty strong job since being at Baylor. I know that one of their guys that I was writing about, let's see here, running back Treston Ebner was named to 4 different All-American teams as either a returner or an all-purpose player. So he knows, I mean, Oregon special teams weren't that great this year. So I think that he could definitely shed some light there and help them out. And then Baylor also had a Jim Thorpe Award finalist with Jalen Petrie. So obviously he's got those safeties playing at a high level. And I think that Oregon's got a lot of talent in that secondary that he could really help take to the next level.
Well, the other thing that I read about him that I'm surprised that more people haven't talked about on Twitter with those reports is that Polage actually worked with Dan Lanning at Sam Houston State.
That's what I thought, yeah.
I think it was 2014 was the 1 year that Lanning was there. And so Lanning, I believe, was their defensive backs coach. So I definitely know that Lanning is well aware of Polage's ability to work with defensive backs because I believe Polage was on the defensive staff there as well. And that was a team that I believe is 1 win away from winning the FCS championship or going to the championship game. So definitely a lot of success there. He knows him well. I'm sure they're still connected. So I definitely think that would be a solid hire. Baylor's defense was phenomenal. The safeties, the defensive backs were really, really good. If you want to see some tape on how good they were, check out the Big 12 championship against Oklahoma State or their win over Oklahoma. Absolutely lights out. So I definitely think if that is the hire, which it's not confirmed yet, and those were just reports that kind of fizzled out after this morning. I don't know if anything's come since then because everything's just kind of been early signing day since then. Mm-hmm. But I think he would be a solid hire. If he's a co-defensive coordinator, it makes me wonder if they would maybe put Joe Salavea as a co-defensive coordinator if he sticks around, or if they try to find another outside hire to kind of combine it. I thought that was intriguing that was the report. But maybe they want to promote somebody from within, maybe Rod Chance, Joe Salavea. I'd probably say Salavea. But again, we don't know who's all staying and who's all going.
For what it's worth, Joe Salavea already has the co-defensive coordinator title. So
that's right. Okay.
I'm not sure exactly what a promotion would look like for him, but obviously he's been one of the strongest staff members for Oregon since he came over from Washington State. Let's see what else we got here. Yeah, guys, keep the questions coming. Obviously, we're keeping this mostly recruiting focused because that's the big storylines out of Eugene today on early signing period. But there's some questions about the staff hire because like we know, it's a bunch of crazy stuff going on all at once. You got the signing period and Lanning trying to assemble his staff here at Oregon. But we'll keep an eye on that chat and see what else comes up. But I'd like to get back to talking about some of these guys that signed, Dylan, if you're on board with that. So we already talked about Sir Mells and Harrison Taggart. And we also talked about Jalil Tucker and kind of what he brings to the fold. I think someone that I'd like to talk about now is Michael Wooten. So let me see if I can bring his highlights up onto my screen, and we'll see what we can get from this. Because not everybody has the longest highlights. Sometimes they just chop them into really quick quick clips, I should say. So let me see what I can get here, and then I will share my screen. All right, here we go. So yeah, Michael Wooten, he is a 6'6" offensive lineman out of Sierra Canyon. He was a guy that I saw in person over the summer when I was down in Southern California for Pac-12 Media Day. And it was actually the same day. We had a covered Pac-12 media day, from early in the morning until mid-afternoon, and then got in the car and drove out to Chatsworth to see Wooten. And I think Wooten, even though he's not one of the more highly rated guys, he's definitely a guy with a ton of upside. I think he excels in the run game, which is good for Oregon. Run blocking is obviously always something that you want with all the strong running backs that the Ducks have on their roster. But I think it's good for Oregon to get him because this is a guy that's battle tested. I wrote I was writing a little bit of editing story about him today. And if you're playing, anytime you're playing in the Trinity League, you're going to be playing against some pretty elite competition out there in Southern California, and that's what you want. You want guys that are going against pretty elite schools, and that's always going to be a bonus. Let me see here. I'm trying to confirm that that's the case because I might have jumped the gun there, and I'm not sure if he is in the Trinity League. So give me just a second while I check this out here. Maybe it'll tell me what league they're in, because I know they play a lot of really good teams in Southern California, and that was basically the point I was trying to get at there. Okay, I'm not sure about that one, so I'm gonna reverse and fact check myself and say that I need to do a little bit more research on that. But either way, the point still stands that he's going against some really good competition in LA. And I think the nice thing about Oregon is they have a ton of depth on the offensive line already, so they're not in the situation where he needs to be an immediate contributor.
Yeah, and I think it's good that they do have somebody in the fold signing today. Given, Kelvin Banks decommitted, went to Texas. Cameron Williams did. Percy Lewis did. I think even before all the coaching changes happened. So it's nice that they do have one at least. Dave Yulee is still kind of floating around. I saw some reports that he was still considering other schools. If I had to guess, I feel like he's going to stay put, but if he does leave, I feel like he'd probably go to USC. He talked about staying close to home and playing, with his family in attendance. And I know he was talking about Miami, and I just don't think Miami, he would go that far given what he's told me. So I really hope they do get Yulee in there as well, because he was talking about being the next Penei Sewell. But, Michael Wooten is such a physical tackle. I think that at that tackle spot specifically is where they could use a little bit more depth, because I know George Moore is probably going to be moving on. Mala Sala is going to be moving on to the NFL. So, and of course, he's probably going to get moved around. I wouldn't imagine that philosophy that Oregon's been running with the offensive line, kind of cross training and getting him ready to play every different position, I don't imagine that goes away entirely. So I do expect him to be moved around. I think he moved at a couple different positions at Sierra Canyon, but very, very physical. I do think you'll have to get a little bit bigger given some of the defensive linemen that are in the Pac-12. I think he's under 300 right now, but very athletic, very under the radar. I don't feel like a lot of people knew much about him going into his recruitment, into his decision, but super talented. And I like what you said about they don't need him to produce right away. I don't know if he's as polished as some of the other guys they did have, or maybe even Dave Yulee. But I do think that he will develop given, the coaching staff that I'm sure that Lanning will put together. I really wanted Mirabal to stick around for this recruiting class. With Kelvin Banks and Cameron Williams, I was super excited for Mirabal to coach some of those guys, but we'll have to see. It's going to be, I think for me personally, I think that's going to be the most intriguing coaching move is what they do to replace Alex Mirabal, because the dude was just a phenomenal recruiter and an incredible coach.
Yeah, Mirabal is going to be sorely missed, and he's the best in the business, like Cristobal says, and he obviously is incredibly knowledgeable when it comes to the offensive line. While you were talking, Dylan, I did some fact checking, and Sierra Canyon plays in the Gold Coast League, where they did win. They were league champs in 2021, so I just feel like it wouldn't sit right with me if I was throwing out there that he was in the Trinity League when it was the Gold Coast League. But yeah, so that's what we're talking about. Mark's question here is he number 55? He was number 55. Sorry if that wasn't super clear in the huddle there, but I just wanted to kind of get some of those highlights for you guys. He spent a lot of his time at left tackle. But it'll be curious to see if that versatility is still really emphasized by whoever Lanning brings on. I would think so. You just want to be able to have those guys to plug and play. Dylan, I know you got to go around 6:15, so I was thinking we could tackle one more guy, if that sounds good to you.
Yeah, I didn't even realize it was already 6:10. Yeah, good looks.
No, yeah,
I didn't realize.
We've been going for 40 minutes already, and we got a pretty good amount of people in here. So, yeah, it's fun times for sure. But I think the guy that I want to talk about next is Devin Jackson from Burke High School in Nebraska. So let's see if I can get his highlights up, and then we'll take another look at some questions, and we'll kind of just go from there. So
absolutely.
Let me see here. All right. So yeah, we got Devin Jackson's highlights up on the screen if you're watching on the live stream. Yeah. So Devin Jackson, where do we start? Awesome kid. I mean, I brought him on the channel, on the podcast. If you guys didn't watch or listen to that episode, you definitely should. Just talking about growing up in Nebraska, what his football journey has been like. Also a guy with a track background. He's a bit undersized for a linebacker. He's listed at 6'2" and kind of in the 200-pound range. So I think that with a guy like him, the biggest challenge is going to be adding to that frame, but you don't want to lose that speed, right? And that was one of the things that we talked about when I spoke with him was he doesn't want to go into a weight program and just have a strength and conditioning guy that's just going to add a lot of weight onto him just for the heck of it, because he knows that speed that he has as a track guy is part of what makes him so special. And I think what makes me so excited about him and why it's potentially a bonus, the frame that he has, is because I think that it's so difficult to get linebackers that can cover really well, right? Noah Sewell is a tremendous athlete, and so is Justin Flo, but I feel like they need to improve on pass coverage. And I think if you have a guy like him, like we saw with Jeffrey Bossa, he's a bit of a different story because he came in as a safety and was forced to move to linebacker because of the depth that they had. But as a result of him being a smaller guy in that linebacker core, he was one of their best coverage guys, and he was one of the biggest success stories of the whole year. So when I look at the tape for Devin Jackson, I think that what stands out to me is he's a really explosive guy, flies the ball all the time. He's always involved in the play. And he's a guy that has a really high motor. So I don't know if I see a guy who's necessarily poised to be an early contributor, especially when you look at some of the guys that they have back. Jackson LeDuc is starting to get more involved. And then obviously you have your Noah Sewells and your Justin Flows. Keith Brown also got a pretty decent amount of play time this year. But, man, I feel like this is another guy that you can clearly see, what makes him stick out and why the staff wanted him so badly. And I think he can be a special guy once he has some time to develop here.
Yeah, TJ Gilbert is another one that maybe could kind of get in the fold next year as well. But yeah, I mean, at that inside linebacker spot, I definitely think you have to be a bit more. You have to have a little bit more than 200 pounds. I completely agree with what you said about kind of keeping the speed, because when that title card came up on his huddle there and it said he was a track runner, I was really surprised because you don't hear about a lot of linebackers running track, but at the same time, when you're 6'2", 200, he plays offense as well. Saw it on a couple highlights there. He was taking pitches out of the backfield and kind of running in motion. Yeah, he's a special player. He's a special talent. Super explosive. I love his motor. Got great hands. I think that first one, you saw that one-handed pick six kind of reaching behind him and taking it to the house. So super talented, super explosive, but I want to see if he can kind of make that transition like we saw from Braden Swinson, where he was kind of undersized coming off the edge a little bit. And then this year coming in, you heard him talk about, I completely redid my body. I'm a lot bigger, but I'm still fast. And I can play fast too. I want to see him kind of make that adjustment. Probably won't be year one going into college, maybe that second year. But he's a guy that I would love to see on special teams, especially because you saw a couple of those where he was blocking kicks, extra points, getting after it in punt coverage and kickoff coverage. So super fast guy. He's a physical tackler. I can't wait to see him in an Oregon uniform because he fits the mold of the Oregon linebackers that they've got.
Yeah, I don't know if this is a good direct comparison, but kind of reminds me maybe a little bit of Troy Dye. He's a guy who came into Oregon as a safety. Obviously, Jackson isn't in the same position playing a safety, but just similar play style as far as flying around and getting a ton of tackles all the time. And that's what you want out of your linebackers. You want guys that can be tackling machines and obviously can be good run defenders, which the Ducks definitely have in Noah Sewell. I think that they might have to get creative with kind of what happens. Looking for another edge rusher, because obviously that's a big question that I think we've talked about. So I don't want to get too repetitive here, but we just talked about some of the things that stand out that you kind of want to see in an Oregon linebacker, and that's going to be another really important position for Lanning to fill, because Kellen Wilson had those guys playing at a really high level, and I'm excited to see what he can do with that program at Nevada. And I'm assuming you are too, because I know you're a big Carson Strong guy, so maybe you had a little bit more vested interest in Nevada than me.
Yeah, I definitely think they needed some help on defense, and the Mountain West is such a offensive minded conference. So I definitely think that he's going to bring kind of that edge to him. But to go off of the point with the linebacker depth, if I may, one thing that I kind of thought about, and I think I've seen a couple people in the comments and on Twitter talking about, is potentially bringing Justin Flo and kind of grooming him as maybe an outside linebacker kind of defensive edge rusher position next year. Which I definitely think he has the size and the athleticism to do. And you kind of build more room for some of those guys in the middle as well, because you talked about so much depth back there in the middle. So I feel like Justin Flo, I feel like he could thrive in that role. You saw him do it a little bit in high school too. But I feel like wherever you put him, he's gonna be a mauler. But I think to kind of let some of the other guys shine as well. Maybe that's something that they consider given their lack of depth at the edge.
Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on what Lanning's plan is. I think that's probably something that we won't have a better idea of until spring football even comes around, or maybe after we see what happens with the roster and NFL draft declarations and how the rest of this class shakes out. But definitely a ton of stuff to be excited about with Jackson. He was one of those guys that he never wavered in his commitment when Cristobal left. He was saying that I committed to Oregon for more than just Mario. And it's always great for a class to have those kind of guys. There's the whole deal with recruiting. You commit to a school, not a coach. But in reality, I feel like, it's a relationships business. That's obviously something that, you don't have to follow recruiting super close to know about. But when I'm talking to these guys about their journeys through recruitments, a lot of the reason that they make those decisions is because of a coach that they're close with. So, Devin Jackson's another really big addition for Oregon. And then I think we still have Ben Roberts and Anthony Jones to talk about. So I can talk about them if you had to head out, but just wanted to make sure I didn't keep it too long if you had something you had to do.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to wrap it up a little sooner than I usually do, just because I have a lot of other things to take care of, double duty, as I like to call it. So, but yeah, I'm super excited for what we've seen so far. It's been super exciting. I love that a lot of the defensive players are staying home, because I think in the offseason, that's where you might see the biggest hit to the depth, to the organizational chart. So I'm excited that we've got some people to talk about. I wasn't sure how many people there would be, how much meat was on the bone per se. But it's exciting, and I'm excited to see if there's more people coming soon, because today's not the only day people can sign. You might see some people this weekend as well.
Absolutely. Well, we got to see what happens the rest of this signing period, because I think it is 2 more days, the 15th through the 17th. So we'll have to keep an eye on that. But Dylan, thanks for coming on to talk about this. If you guys want to follow Dylan, you can find him at DRK Sports News on Twitter, and he's also doing some awesome stuff at the transfer portal with the transfer portal. So I'll stay on and talk about the rest of these signees, and then take some of your guys' questions. But we'll bid Dylan farewell for this episode.
All right, see y'all. Thanks, Max.
Yeah, no problem. Appreciate you, Dylan. All right, so just me now, but yeah, we'll roll right along. The show must go on, even if it's just me. But we'll talk about Ben Roberts, big time defensive lineman coming out of East High School in Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City, man. I mean, Salt Lake City has been such a strong, Utah, I should say, rather, has been such a strong producer of trench talent these past couple years. I think that when you're looking at, we were talking about Sir Mells being a guy that Oregon really needed because you want to bring those SEC body types to the Pac-12. That was something that Mario Cristobal made such a priority. But that doesn't mean that you skim over the guys that are closer to you in your backyard. You think of guys like Siaki Ika, who I believe is with Baylor now. He was another big-time defensive lineman that I was surprised Oregon didn't land when he was coming out of high school. But he also went to East High School in Utah. So we have Harrison Taggart as a guy who's coming from Utah at Corner Canyon, signing with Oregon. But Ben Roberts, I mean, he's a guy that he's pretty big. I believe he's 6'3", 290 in that range. Let me see if I can confirm that here, because you obviously want to if you can get a guy that's almost around 300 pounds coming in to high school into college. I think that's a tremendous advantage, and he's only going to be able to refine his body. So 6'4", 290 is what he's listed at. But just to talk about kind of some of the things that stand out to me, he's got a nose for the football, obviously. You see here with him, recovering that fumble, and he just bull rushes a lot of guys. And he's got a lot of quickness, I think, for how big he is, which is, I think, such a common trait on both sides of the ball when you're looking at what makes these guys unique. Whether it be on the offensive line or the defensive line. I feel like so often I'll hear, guys like this, guys this big shouldn't move this well or this quickly. And you can definitely see that quickness with Roberts. These are his junior highlights because that's the most up-to-date ones we could find on Huddle, but really good at engaging his blockers and getting off of them. Sometimes I get really animated when I'm doing these, when I'm breaking down film, but I just get excited about it all. We're talking more Ben Roberts, and then look at Utah as kind of a pipeline state for Oregon. You talk about how important it is if you want to win the Pac-12, you got to win the West Coast and get some of the best guys out of that region. Jackson Powers Johnson, obviously a guy that they've added coming out of Corner Canyon, and then you have Jeffrey Bassa, who got a lot of time as a true freshman this season out of Kearns High School, I believe it was. So that's another big school in the Salt Lake area. And then how can you not talk about Orem? Bringing Noah Sewell, and then I was trying to think of what school Panay went to. I want to say it was Desert Oak or Desert City, something like that. But I think that just goes to my point about how strong of a state Utah is and how big of a pipeline it's been for the Ducks. So with Roberts here, we have a question. He plays a lot of end here, but should we expect him to kick in at the next level? I think you could see that. That's going to be one of the things that I'm going to be interested to see. Is how the line is going to shake out for Oregon, especially on that end position. You look at a guy like Brendan Dorless. We don't know what's happening with him as far as if he's coming back next year or not, because he's definitely had his best season so far. And then you have Trevin Mae, who was playing pretty well at that on the edge for Oregon and at that outside linebacker spot. And then you're also looking at Adrian Jackson as a guy who was working at linebacker, so he's not so much at the defensive line. But I think given his body type, I think that it would definitely make sense to maybe think that he would probably go in. But if he's athletic enough, and if they can get him moving, if he's moving the way that they want him to, then I think that would be a big advantage for them if they did want to have that versatility like we saw with Dorless this year, right? He moved inside and played some outside, and they have some pretty solid players on the interior already with Popo Amavai and Keon Ware-Hudson, who was a little bit banged up to end the regular season. But I have one more guy that I wanted to talk about here. Kind of the big commit of the day, right? It was kind of the fireworks. Anthony Jones, jumbo athlete, defensive line, tight end guy off the edge out of Liberty High School. He's a teammate of Sir Mells, who's Oregon 2022 defensive line signee. So let me see if I can pull up some of his recent highlights, and let's just take it from there. All right, so let's see. Let me get the highlights up here. Let's see. Here we go. All right, Anthony Jones, Liberty High School, 6'5", 240. He was the big flip of the day. The Ducks flipped him from Texas to Oregon on signing day. He signed with the Ducks. And I think this was a pretty big pickup for them, because you look at Nevada as a state, they're putting out a lot of really elite guys year after year, I feel like. And Jones is a guy who's been pretty high on Oregon for a while. I thought that Oregon was in the lead when he decommitted from Washington a while back in the recruiting process. Side note, I tweeted this out a while ago, earlier today from the Ducks Digest Twitter, but 3 of Oregon's 7 signees today were former Washington commits. Anthony Jones was a Washington commit at one point. Sir Mells was a Washington commit at one point. And then Ben Roberts was also a Washington commit. So it's just kind of funny. I know that Oregon fans always like to give UW fans a hard time, but you see on the tape here, Anthony Jones, just how he's having a really, really good impact on the defensive line, and just pushing guys around. But he also has really good hands for a guy his size. He can jump, he can run, he can block. So I think that these jumbo athletes are always really interesting, because you just have options. Very few people actually play both sides of the ball at the college level. We saw that a little bit with DJ Johnson this year, when the Ducks were pretty thin on the defensive line, defensive end, I should say, when Kayvon Thibodeau went down, and then we saw DJ Johnson come in and play there. And then the Ducks have a lot of depth at tight end, right? You look at Terrence Ferguson, Maliki Matavao, Spencer Webb, and then DJ Johnson. Those are some of the guys that the roster could be that we could be seeing on the roster next year. And yeah, Jones is definitely a special talent that I think they're really excited about. He's a strong tackler, and he's good at not over pursuing. I feel like that's another thing that is really important when you're looking at guys that play at the line of scrimmage, and how the Ducks have been a little bit hot and cold. I feel like really on the pass rushing spectrum. It sucks to get to beat your assignment, and then if you just over penetrate, then you can't get the sack and finish the job. So I think that's another thing I'm going to be looking for here to see how he does. But look at how fast he is if you're watching the film here on the live stream. For him to be able to carry that, and they're even flexing him out wide here to just play him as a jump ball receiver. He's a special talent for sure. He's someone that you should be excited about, no question about it. And I think another part is that I'm going to be curious to see is I don't know how many of the guys that signed today are going to be enrolling early. That's probably the next biggest thing that we have to see, apart from how the rest of the class finishes out. But who's going to ultimately sign early from this batch of recruits that the Ducks were able to secure signatures from today with their national letters of intent. But another side note with we were talking about Sir Mells to start, and then obviously ending here with his teammate Anthony Jones. It definitely doesn't hurt that they're with their efforts with Cyrus Moss being another Nevada guy. I think another kind of side note with Cyrus Moss that we can talk about is when he was on that official visit to USC this past weekend, is that he took that trip with a lot of his Bishop Gorman teammates. Zion Branch committed today, and then Fabian Ross was there. I'm trying to think of who else that they have from Bishop Gorman, but I think that's obviously going to help USC recruiting him. And I think USC is in a pretty good spot with him, but ultimately that's why you have to watch how these things all play out and pan out, I should say. But those are kind of, I just wanted to give a little bit of a breakdown of who all of these guys were that Oregon signed here in the 2022 class to start off early signing period. I think ultimately, like I said earlier, it was a better day than we really expected. I think that you really, you've got to be really happy with Jalil Tucker. That Jalil Tucker signing is huge. He's definitely one of the top guys in California, and it's huge that they were able to lock him in, because I think he's a guy that you're maybe a little bit more confident in contributing a little bit earlier in his college career. But let's see what other questions we have, and then we'll wind down here on this episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. So let's see what we got here, folks. Let's see. Mark has a question here. Mark, thanks for your question. Do we have any idea who our strength coach will be? What running backs are expected back? Yeah, this is a little bit of a two-parter. I think the first part is a little bit more uncertain. There have been some rumors and reports of Aaron Feld going to Miami. So we still haven't seen any candidates right now for strength coaches at Oregon should Feld ultimately end up leaving. Again, I'm not reporting that. It's just something that we're waiting to see if it's finalized, but there has been some chatter out there that he would be following Mario to Miami. You think about him being a Georgia guy originally. He's got ties out there, and it makes a lot of sense for him to be closer to home. So we got to wait and see. That's kind of what we're looking like. I tried to get that information out to you guys as soon as we hear someone who might be looking like a candidate for Oregon. And then what running backs are expected back? This is a really fascinating question because everybody on the roster right now, I believe, has more eligibility to play in the 2022 season if they wanted to. CJ Verdell obviously had that season-ending injury against Stanford earlier in the 2021 season, but I think with just how much tread he has on his tires, he's played at a pretty high level since he's been at Oregon. I think this is probably his best shot to try to get drafted, and I think that it would probably make sense for him to try to go to the NFL, but I don't want to speculate too much. And then Travis Dye is kind of a wild card. He's had a really good season. He had a good season even in the pandemic shortened year in 2020, right? You know, he was one of the, I think he might have been the team's leading receiver if I'm remembering that correctly. But he's a guy who just always makes the most of his opportunities and really shined as Oregon's lead back the rest of the season down the stretch after Verdell got hurt. But then you're looking at Sean Dollars, you're looking at Byron Cart. We have hardly seen any of Sean Dollars this season. I actually don't think we've seen him at all now that I say that out loud. You look at him getting hurt before fall camp, and he's a guy who I think I'm really excited to see because he looked good in the 2020 season, especially in the Pac-12 championship game, and then we hardly saw him at all in the Fiesta Bowl against Iowa State. So Carbo's going to be back, and then we have Dollars and McGee is going to be back, and Trey Benson as well. So that's a really, really crowded running back room, but that's kind of what the depth is looking like right now. Shamar asked, bro, who is Dylan? Dylan Rubin King was the other host here in the first half of the show. He's another writer for me at Ducks Digest, and he does a lot of awesome stuff. But he's usually on here with me a lot. So that's Dylan. And then we have, let's see, what other questions that we have? Timonacci, let's see, his question is, now that the transfer portal is so huge with experienced talent, do you see teams reducing high school recruits and adding transfer spots like Dana Altman does? And how would that change the team's entire strategy? Great question, Timonacci. I think for Oregon, really, I kind of want to just take an Oregon angle on this question. I think that you still want to prioritize the recruiting trail because that's just you got to keep recruiting and you want to bring in some of the best guys from the high school ranks. I feel like the transfer portal is kind of viewed as a backup option for some schools, some programs. When you look at Oregon, obviously, with this 2022 class, I think we have to temper expectations a little bit, just given the time of the coaching transition. But that said, I think that they can go to the transfer portal to make up for to plug in some of the holes that they might still have when the 2022 class, the recruiting classes are kind of winding down. So I don't know if I'd say I see a lot of teams doing it overall. It's really specific to each team's situation. If you're a really good recruiting team, then maybe you don't need to go into the transfer portal. But if you're not a team like Oregon that typically lands a lot of high-end recruits, then maybe you find yourself going into the transfer portal. So I'd say for that one, I would say it's kind of specific to each team. Another question is, are we going to target a QB in the transfer portal? There hasn't been any reports right now. I think that they would be wise to, just because they have a lot of youth in that quarterback room. So it would be nice for them to have someone who's a little bit more experienced in case somebody gets hurt, for example. Whether it's Thompson or Butterfield or Ashford, who wins the starting job next year or is currently poised to be the starting quarterback next year. I think you can help yourself by having a little bit more of a proven guy in that room if someone were to go down. So I think that they probably should target somebody in the transfer portal. You're looking at names like Dylan Gabriel from UCF. I think he took visits to Ole Miss and UCLA, so I'm not sure how realistic that is for Oregon right now. But with Kenny Dillingham, I think someone with him coming to Oregon, I think someone to watch is Bo Nix, who recently entered the transfer portal, because Kenny Dillingham was on that Auburn staff when Bo Nix and Auburn beat Oregon in 2019. And that was one of the stronger seasons that Bo Nix had at Auburn. So maybe there's a little bit of a reunion there in Eugene. But those are some of the names that I'm looking at right now. Michael Penix just went to UW, so obviously that's not an option for Oregon, but that's some transfer portal quarterback news. Dwayne's question: so we only got 7 signed today, or did we get more? Yeah, so that's the latest that we're hearing as of this show recording, about 6:30 on Wednesday night. 7 signed letters of intent for the Ducks, but they do have 12 total commits right now in this class. So we're still waiting to see what happens. The biggest name right now is Tetairoa McMillan, All-American wide receiver out of Servite High School in Anaheim, California. There were actually new reports coming out today on Wednesday that he's going to be signing on Friday, and that's going to be, his decision is going to be between Oregon and Arizona, which is kind of interesting to hear because his final 3 was Oregon, Arizona, and USC. And obviously, when you got a guy like Lincoln Riley coming in at USC, I feel like he'd be a pretty big threat to get any really big-time skill guys out of LA. But you have to consider that Arizona is going to be the future home of T-Mac's quarterback, one of his best friends, Noah Fafita. And, man, that guy's a gamer. I stopped by Servite over the summer and got to see him in person, and he just tore it up in Trinity League. And I know that he's kind of a smaller quarterback, but he is just a fierce competitor, and he's a solid quarterback that I think could really make some noise in the Pac-12. So it sounds like it's Oregon versus Arizona for that one to see what's going on there. And then Dylan was talking about Dave Yulee, Washington lineman. I feel like since USC was a big competitor for him down the line in his recruitment, that would be someone to watch for. So that's kind of what we're hearing, Dwayne. 7 signed letters today, but they do have more commits. And that's why I think it's a good thing that a lot of these guys, if they are committed but didn't sign today, I think that kind of keeps the window open for Oregon to get in there and start that relationship, because obviously that's a big you got to get those relationships going. Let's see. What else do we have here? All right, Breezy's question is, now that we took Kenny from Florida State, do you think we're in good standing with landing Kevin Coleman? That's really interesting, because I do feel like before Oregon kind of emerged more in the summer for Kevin Coleman, I think that it was really looking like Florida State was in the driver's seat, right? I feel like that was one of the only trips that he took. He was posting about them pretty frequently. But you look at Dillingham, and he's a tireless recruiter. He's a young guy, and we're hearing a lot of good things there. Hopefully he's going to be an innovative guy. I think that would probably be a plus for them. The biggest thing for me when you're looking at any wide receiver in this 2022 class, you got to see what happens with Brian McClendon, because he's one of the strongest recruiters on this staff, and he's going to play a pivotal role in any wide receiver coming to Oregon ultimately. So I think that's gonna be what we have to watch here going forward. Let's see, what other questions do we have here? Let's see. Here it comes. Yeah, so Shamar's comment here is, when February comes, Dan's going to recruit his butt off. I think it might even be before that. I talked about why for Oregon fans, if you're an Oregon fan, maybe you guys can put this in the comments. Are you rooting for Georgia because you want to see Dan do well, or are you rooting against Georgia because you want him to be available to, hit the recruiting trail and get to work building this Oregon team? I think that'll be kind of fascinating to follow, because I can understand why you want to see him do well, but obviously with the timing of all this, I think it's pretty tough. So you're looking at Bama, Georgia, Michigan, and Cincy. I don't know if I'm the only one person that would think this, but it'd be nice to see a Georgia-Bama rematch, just so we don't get that again. Sorry, in the first round, rather, in the semifinals, so that we don't see that again for a national championship game. But obviously that's not going to happen. It's going to be Georgia, Michigan, and then Bama, Cincy. So right on with that. Randy Payne Go Dogs from Tifton, Georgia. Randy, thanks for tuning into the show. We've been getting some Georgia fans in some of these shows lately because obviously Dan Lanning's a Georgia guy and he's taking over the program. So I think that it's cool just to see the reach that the podcast has, that the live show has, and it's just super cool to be able to do that. So shout out to Randy for hopping in the show. Chris Nelson, 2023 is what we build in. Yeah, 2023 is definitely going to be, actually, okay. If this is the Chris from my my master's program in Oregon, it might be. What's going on, Chris? Thanks for tuning into the show. Yeah, 2023 is going to, because you think about the whole dynamic of everything with recruiting. This 2022 class isn't going to be Dan Lanning's. A lot of these guys are going to be Mario Cristobal's recruits. And then that 2023 class is going to be the first one of fully comprised of Dan Lanning recruits. So that was what was tough. I feel like what was tough about the departure with Mario is I feel like the 2022 class was awesome, but they were so close to pushing ahead into that upper tier in 2023. But obviously now that you're in transition, you got to focus on the 2022 class. So I think that's one of the big things to kind of keep in mind when you're looking at where Oregon is as far as pushing into their, pushing for another level of elite recruiters, the Georgias, the Notre Dames, the Oklahomas, schools like that are already into 2023 because they did such a great job in 22. The Texas A&Ms, they had a phenomenal haul in the 2022 class. So that was what I had to say about 2023. Thanks for the comment, Chris. Sam Kim, after today, what are the biggest needs / losses position group wise? For me, I definitely feel like you got to keep prioritizing defensive line, even though you only have 2 offensive linemen in the fold right now with Wooten and Yulee. I think that that's kind of an area that the Ducks have been a little bit behind on. I feel like recruiting is in the defensive line. And that's not to say that they don't have solid guys on the roster, because they definitely do. But you can never have too many guys on the defensive line, especially if there's one big lesson that we learned from the Mario Cristobal era, it's that you win the game in the trenches. Maybe that doesn't mean running the ball, all the time, but you got to have bodies in the trenches, and that's what all the best teams in the country do. So I'd say the defensive line is really big. Cornerback is another one that I think is really important. That's why I think that they got to prioritize getting Jalil Florence back in the fold, because we don't know what's going on with Mikael Wright, if he's going to be coming back next year or not. And then DJ James is in the portal, like we said. So, luckily for the Ducks, Triquez Bridges got a lot of burn this year. So did Dante Manning. But if Mikael Wright goes off to test NFL waters, you just have a really, really young cornerback group. So I think that you need to keep going after those guys. And then another one is wide receiver as a whole, I'd say is very important, but speed at wide receiver. A guy that I always think about is Isaiah Satania, who is a former Oregon commit, and then he ended up signing with Arkansas today after flipping a while ago, before Cristobal even left, actually, if I remember that correctly. But you got to get speed at wide receiver, or at least take those swings. Oregon was in it down to the wire with for Jalen Waddle when he was coming out of high school. Those are really hard battles to win, obviously, especially with Texas now. The Ducks have some work to do to get established there again. But yeah, I'd say defensive line, cornerback, and wide receiver are some of the biggest ones that stick out to me. And then quarterback was another position that got asked about earlier in the live stream. But I think that obviously with Tanner Bailey backing off his commitment, I don't know if he's a guy that they can maybe get back in the fold. They already have some pretty talented guys on the roster, but they're all freshmen, and we don't really know what we have from them. We saw, limited action with those guys in the spring practice and throughout fall camp. And then we've seen one half of Ty Thompson in that Stony Brook game when Anthony Brown got hurt. So, I say that they need to go for quarterbacks, but that's not an indictment to the guys on the roster. It's just, you got to give yourself options at the end of the day and put yourself in a good position to win. All right, let's see here. Okay, can confirm that Chris Nelson's not the one that I was talking about in my Oregon program. Let's see. Yeah, and then Breezy's talking about, he says, our wide receiver room is loaded with young talent. It definitely is. It absolutely is. But I think when you're looking at some of the guys that left, you're looking at Michael Pittman, who transferred. They're going to lose Johnny Johnson. They're going to lose Jalen Redd. You just got to stack options. You got to give yourself as many offensive weapons as you can. I think the sky's the limit for guys like a Troy Franklin or a Dante Thornton. We didn't really even see Isaiah Brevard. But I think that when you look at the guys that they lost in this recruiting class, with Nicholas Anderson backing off his commitment and Isaiah Satania, I think you've got to try to keep going for wide receivers, especially if the Ducks do end up airing the ball out some more. It's going to be a little tough, I feel like, for them to recruit, just because you look at the way that the Ducks have played these past 2 years. The passing attack has not been particularly effective, and it hasn't really been an emphasis even. So I feel like even though it's tough to see Mario Cristobal go, I feel like the offense kind of needed a reset. You needed to find you want to see an offense that is a little bit more balanced. And Lanning has said that they're going to air it out. Chris Hudson is also awesome. He's done really well. Breezy, I can't believe I forgot to mention him. I mean, you look at those games against Utah, and he was just balling out. I feel like, when the game was really ugly at times, I feel like he was one of the only bright spots. Oh, Devin Williams too. Gosh, how could I not mention Devin Williams? He's another guy that I think is going to be really, really critical for Oregon to get the ball to next year, because once he got the ball this year, a lot of good things happened. So, yeah, I think that's kind of my reasoning behind why I think they need to get more wide receivers. You can never have too many. Better to have too many than not enough at wide receiver. And yeah, we got to see what happens with T-Mac and then Stephon Johnson as well. He's the only guy they have in Texas now. Colin Jones, his question, LaMichael James, running back coach. I think he's talking about the tweet that went out earlier today. Just someone was saying, I'd like to see LaMichael James as a running back coach. That'd be pretty cool. I mean, having a former Duck man in the running backs, that'd be awesome. I think that that'd be something to see for sure. And it's cool to see guys kind of giving back to the program like that, and coming in to lead the running backs. So that's just so hard, I feel like, answering these questions, because we don't know what the staff's going to look like right now. That's the biggest thing that they really have to prioritize is getting more people kind of figured out. But I don't know if that's going to have to wait until after the bowl game, or if we can see that getting wrapped up before then. Let's see. All right. I'm going to take one more question, and then I think I'm going to head out, because we're almost at an hour and a half, and this has been an awesome show. Let's see. But yeah, I think that it's a successful day one of early signing period for Oregon. Like I said, I think it went better than a lot of people thought, better than I was expecting. Obviously, the big news of Anthony Jones flipping his commitment from Texas to Oregon was a huge win. Gotta get that staff figured out so that they can get more people recruiting. The more people that Lanning obviously gets on staff, then the better. Because he's going to be doing stuff with Georgia, but he's also said that he doesn't want to rush these hires, and I don't blame him. This is this first head coaching gig. You think he wants to rush the hires and not get the right guy? I think that's going to be huge for them. So I feel like I'm rambling a little bit, but yeah, Jonathan, you just joined. Apologize that the timing didn't work out, but appreciate you guys coming to look at the show. If you're still watching on the YouTube live stream, do me a huge favor. Just take a second out of your day and subscribe to the channel, please. It's a tremendous help, and it really helps me keep doing my thing, covering the Ducks for you guys and bringing you all the Oregon content you love. And it's free. So please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. That's the only favor that I ask out of you guys. And then stay locked in to the social media, right? You can find me on Twitter, that name on your screen, at mtorresports, covering the Ducks all day, every day. And then we also have our other platforms, obviously YouTube, Oregon Football, Max Torres. And then on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, we're at Ducks Digest. So day one of the early signing period for Oregon figures to be the most eventful for the Ducks. But that's why we got to follow everything and see how it all shakes out. But that'll do it from me. Thanks you guys so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. We will see you in the next one. Everybody, take care.